first of all, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you guys for being here. I was asked to give this talk, and I was really concerned. I was excited, but then I became really concerned when I realized it was 10 a.m. on a Sunday, and getting restaurateurs out early on a Sunday is tough, but thank you guys for being here. I have a tremendous amount of stuff to talk about. I knew that once I titled this talk, Other People's Money, I was confident that I would have at least one person show up, my girlfriend. She's great at spending other people's money. She's actually should be the one talking about this. But no, I have a tremendous amount of stuff to talk about. I think as it relates to the restaurant world and the real estate world, it's such a broad topic. So I want to, for the format of this talk, in order to create as much value as I can, I want to give a little bit of context to who I am for those of you who aren't familiar with me, move into some philosophy and tactics, but then get as quick as possible into Q&A, because I think that that's the way that we can really get granular, really talk about specific things, specific questions that you might have, because it is such a broad topic. So be thinking about some questions that you might have, or some comments, or some experience that you have as it relates to the restaurant world and dealing with landlords and real estate. But I will tell you that there is without question, because of this device right here, the biggest and most frothy opportunity for restaurateurs as it relates to real estate that we've ever had and probably will ever have. And I'll get to why in a second, but first let me back up and talk a little bit about who I am. I am a West Coast guy. I started in the restaurant business when I was 18 years old. I asked a girl out on a date to my freshman college formal, winter formal, and she said yes. And then I saw how much the formal was gonna cost me. And I immediately called my dad, and I was like, hey, Dad, can I borrow some money? And my dad, who's a really generous guy, turned into Randy Jackson from, what's the show? American Idol. And he was like, yep, that's going to be a no for me, dog. And so I did what anybody who needs cash does. You either do something illegal or you start waiting tables. And I chose the waiting tables, which ultimately changed the trajectory in my life. I have been in the restaurant business since I was 18 years old. I've done everything: bus, cook, dishwash, wait tables, bartend. And it was about 6 years ago that my best friend and my college roommate and I decided to start our company. And our first concept is out of Dallas. It's called Bowl and Barrel, which is a high-end boutique bowling alley, restaurant, and bar. And this was 2012. This was right after the big recession happened. And what we found in the real estate market at that time was there was a lot of vacancy. There was a lot of open square footage. And we found developers who needed and would do anything to fill that vacancy that they've been sitting on for 4, 5, 6, 7 years now. And so we had this idea to create a company that was an entertainment draw for developers who would be willing to pay us, basically, in order to put our concepts there. So we went and opened our first concept in 2012 called Bowl and Barrel, which we were able to negotiate. And I want you to understand what we were. We were two guys who were unproven and who had no money. And we were able to open a almost 20,000 square foot bowling alley, high-end, boutique, really beautiful space, by using predominantly landlords' money, which is pretty unique, right? And so the way we were able to do it is, who's familiar with the term TI, tenant allowance? Okay, good, most of us. For those of you who didn't raise your hand, TI, or tenant improvement allowance, is money landlords are willing to give to a new tenant to build out their space so that they can rent it. And the way the landlord gets that money back is through rent. So we went to a developer who had been sitting on some vacancy and said, hey, we've got this idea, we want to put in a bowling alley. Will you give us $2.5 million to help us out? And much to our surprise, he said yes. So that left just a little bit of capital for us to raise. Now, the challenge that we faced was, he said, yes, I'm going to give you the money, but I also need to see your balance sheet so that you can guarantee it. And we went, well, so we don't have money, so we don't have anything to guarantee. So we had to get creative. And what we did, and this is a tactic that isn't used that often, but it's starting to happen more and more. What we were able to do is talk to our investors, and we said, if you guys are willing to defer the distributions from the profits of the business till the end of the year, we're going to take those profits, put them in an escrow account, so that the landlord will know that there's some money there in case the business doesn't work and he can take that. And after we pay rent for a year, we'll distribute the profits to the investors. And we did that. We agreed to do that for 3 years until the guarantee burned off. So we were able to, in essence, get $2.5 million from a landlord with no guarantee and no track record at a time when there was really seemingly no money in the real estate world. So that was our first deal. Immediately after that, we opened a concept called Mutts Canine Cantina, which is a full-service restaurant and bar that overlooks a private membership-based dog park. The dogs are members. We have a couple thousand members that pay $17 a month to come into the park while your dog runs around, and we have bark rangers that look after the dogs and clean up after the dogs, while you get to kick back and have a margarita under a tree and let your dog run around. So that's a concept that we opened a few months after Bowl and Barrel. That one, because it is a outdoor space, doesn't have a lot of build-out requirements. So for the sake of this discussion, we won't talk a lot about that concept as it relates to real estate, except for what that concept does for developers is it provides these green spaces that they're required to put into their developments. It allows them to now monetize that green space. So they're very willing to give us that green space for very little in order to take what was just an empty park and now make some money on it. Our third concept that we opened a few months after this one is a concept called the Rustic, which is a full-service restaurant and bar that overlooks a 2,000 to 3,000 person outdoor concert venue. And that deal, we were able to get a couple $1 million, very similar structure to our original Bowl and Barrel deal, where we put some money into escrow and we were able to build out the Rustic. So total, and I want to preface this, or I want to emphasize this, all of this happened within a 9-month period. So we opened all 3 concepts within a 9-month window. Since then, we've managed to grow. We're about 1,000 employees. We're 10 units throughout the state of Texas, Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston. Our 4th concept that we opened was actually an answer to one of our neighbors. So that original Bowl and Barrel was next door to a bar, and it was a really crummy bar, but it was busy, and I couldn't figure it out. And so I got to know the team over there, and I went in and I asked them, I said, where do you get your customers from? And they said, honestly, Kyle, 90% of it is coming from Bowl and Barrel from you, because you're on a 2-hour wait. People put their name on the list, come over here, eat, drink, and then go back and bowl. And so I decided that instead of feeding our neighbor, we would be our neighbor moving forward. So we opened our 4th concept called the General Public, which is an American gastro pub, and we have 2 of those, one in San Antonio, one in Houston. And those will always be next door to a Bowl and Barrel moving forward, just because we like to create critical mass between those 2 concepts. So again, 10 units, 4 years, 5 years, 4 different brands, 3 different cities. And what we're seeing now, and this is where we can start getting into tactical. I am seeing a really interesting trend happen. What's going on, if you look at real estate trends, square footage that's being developed because of the way capital has flowed for the last 5 to 6 years has increased exponentially. I was driving from the Galleria to here this morning, 15-minute drive, I counted 11 cranes in the air. So real estate is being built, commercial real estate is being built at an exponential rate. What's also happening is this guy named Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, has turned the retail space on its head. And now, when I want socks or a toothbrush, I go here. A couch. I've ordered a couch on Amazon before. And so what you have is you have the retail world, the need for brick and mortar is shrinking, but commercial real estate is growing. So there's now a space that over the next 5 to 10 years will need to be filled by one of two things: entertainment or food and beverage. And the reason why I believe that the market is so frothy for us is because we're going to be the prettiest girl at the bar when all these developers are trying to buy us drinks. Because they're going to be sitting there with hundreds of thousands of vacant retail space. We're already seeing it with new development, but also the shrinkage of brands in bankruptcy, Toys R Us going out of business, Sears going out of business. I walked into Best Buy the other day, and they're going to be next on the list unless they change. You know, the retail brands that don't understand how to create experiential retail and are stuck in their old ways, like Best Buy is currently, they're going to be gone in 5 years. You know, I look at like a Toys R Us. Toys R Us had a massively missed opportunity. If they decided to, instead of being a toy store that sold toys that just like Amazon, and changed their model to experiential and built slime rooms and ball pits and Build-A-Bear workshops and video game rooms, they would be thriving right now. But they stuck to the old model, and you still see retailers do that. Raise your hand if you're familiar with a brand called Wish. A few of you. That's what I thought. Do you know Wish? You don't know Wish. Wow. So Wish, by some estimates, is valued somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 billion to $12 billion. Wish is an online shopping company that you're able to buy directly from manufacturers in China. You buy this shirt or buy tennis shoes, and you skip the middleman retailer altogether. Wish's valuation, even on a conservative estimate at $7 billion, is worth more than double what Macy's valuation is right now. To put that into perspective, so we're talking a company that most of us haven't even heard of, is a purely online retailer that is bigger than one of the biggest names in retail that we've seen over the last 50 years. So the market is trending quickly and exponentially in our favor, where retailers are shrinking, square footage is increasing, and there's going to be a void that's going to be filled by us, which basically means that we're able to go into, over the next 5 to 10 years, landlords, and outside of giving their firstborn child, they'll do anything for us to be there. So I challenge you, first and foremost, to be bold in what you ask. Now, I will say you have to be smart about how you ask for TI dollars. You have to understand general math principles that the more a landlord gives you, the more you're going to be paying in rent. So you have to understand your business and what your business can afford in rent. I generally around ideally what we call a 6% occupancy cost. So 6% of our revenue is what we allocate to rent, including CAM, including taxes, all that stuff. We like to exceed no more than 8%. That's just for our model. I know each business is slightly different, but landlords have to have a return on their investment, and the way they can do that is by charging you higher rent or charging your neighbors higher rent. And that's where I think that we can be really clever. And what we've found, and what I encourage you guys to find, is find that value proposition for a landlord and why you can add value to a development by being there. If you can convince somebody that you're going to add value to their development, they will gladly pay you to be there so that they can charge your neighbor who's not asking for money high rents. And the way you provide value is two ways. The first thing is brand recognition. You know, Apple can get anything they want from anybody because every developer would love to have an Apple store. It's for the same reason why we wear Rolexes or drive Mercedes. There's certain brands that say certain things about us. Same is true in the retail space. These developers want certain brands because it says something about their development. If you don't happen to own Apple, then the other way you do that is by driving traffic. We have large-scale venues, so we have critical mass on a standpoint of entertainment. We can bring in tens of thousands of people a week, but you can also do that by volume. Starbucks is a good example of a brand that is a small footprint, but they have high frequency, so they drive traffic. So there's value there. And also they're Starbucks, but there's plenty of brands that aren't Starbucks that just drive frequency. So tap into those points when you're selling your brand to a developer. Driving frequency, adding brand value, cachet, and if you sell that story, I promise you they will pay for you to be there. I'll tell you one quick story. When we opened Bowl and Barrel, our original Bowl and Barrel, there was a flagship Whole Foods in the development. And this flagship Whole Foods was, I want to say it was 50,000 square feet, 60,000 square feet. They were not paying rent for 7 years. They had zero rent for 7 years. And the reason why is because the landlord said, Whole Foods, if they come here, that validates they'll be our anchor tenant, that validates our development. And so we are willing to not charge Whole Foods rent for 7 years. And I remember sitting there outside of the Whole Foods when we were when we were building our Bowl and Barrel, thinking how cool would it be to be an anchor tenant that could command something like that. Well, I can tell you 6 years later, we are in the industry now that can do that if we're smart, which is amazing. I'm seeing TI dollars where I was getting $1.5 million, $2 million for a space. Now we're getting $5, $6, $7 million from a landlord to come and build a restaurant there. That would have been unheard of 5, 10 years ago. We are positioned. In fact, I had this conversation the other day with a guy in real estate. My thesis is that grocery stores, supermarkets are going to be one of the next, which had traditionally been for the last 75 years, some of the best real estate anchors you could have because everybody needs to buy food, everybody needs grocery stores. That's going away. And the real estate guy I was talking to was like, no. People still want to go buy groceries at the grocery store. And I said, really, Rick? His name wasn't Rick, but I felt like a Rick. I was like, really, Rick? When was the last time you went and like thumped a cantaloupe at the supermarket? And he was like, well, I don't really do that, but my wife is the one that buys the groceries. I was like, okay, when was the last time she went to the grocery store and bought fresh? He goes, well, she gets it delivered. I was like, yes. So I think that I'm telling you that story to tell you that the shift that's happening because of this will benefit us, because one thing that this can't replace is all of us sitting around a table at a restaurant, or all of us hanging out at a bar having drinks. That's the one thing that we're not anywhere close to this replacing our industry. Now, there will be shifts and changes, but the social aspect of what we do is our leverage. And landlords are starting to realize that. They're starting to understand that. And if you're good at selling your story, I promise you, you will start seeing not, just for a show of hands, TI dollars per foot, what do you think is kind of average rate right now? $30 a foot? $50? Does anybody know? $50 a foot? 50 to 75? Yeah, anybody else want to guess? I'm seeing I'm getting $450 a foot. So do the math. If you're building a 10,000 square foot space, that's $4.5 million. The money's there. The money's there. If you're good at selling your concept, if you're good at selling your brand, I can assure you the money's there and they're glad to have you. Before we go to Q&A, I want to just kind of end with this, that we have, I just don't think that there's any better time to be doing what we're doing. And you know, we're fighting about politics or what bathroom somebody should use, but when you look at the macro data, there is no better time to be alive than right now and doing business than right now. And you guys and us, we're in the industry and in arguably the best place in this country to be doing business, being in America. And I promise you that my thesis is correct if you take advantage of it. Thank you. I would love to move to Q&A. I know we have a limited amount of time left. What kind of questions do we have? Yes, ma'am. Yes. So her question was, do we have intentions of owning real estate? The short answer is yes. The long answer is I think that's very concept specific. You know, probably arguably the best concept. I don't know how many standalone restaurateurs we have here, but arguably the best example of something that to own is a standalone footprint pad on a freeway somewhere. Where commonly a common practice is what's called the sale leaseback. Raise your hand if you're familiar with sale leaseback. Okay, for those of you who don't know, that's where you buy a piece of property, you develop your restaurant on it, you start paying yourself rent, and then you sell that property to somebody else at a higher price, much higher price than you paid for it, because you have now a built-in cash flow rent-paying tenant. So that's commonly done, but really, frankly, that's concept-driven, I think, more than anything. And if you have the right concept to do that, it makes sense. And you have to have the cash to make it happen too. But yes, sir. Sure. I think the same principles apply, but you know, your cost of doing business is it should be a lot more favorable too. You know, when you're in Midtown Manhattan, you're paying $700 a foot in rent. When you're in Stephenville, you're paying $17 a foot in rent, right? Now the money is probably where you'll find the most lucrative TI allowances is on major developers because they have the cash flow. They're building a 500,000 square foot development that they need to fill, and they have built-in layered TI allowance. They have. I mean, I look at it like a pie, and it's how big of a slice of that pie can I get. And really, that's all based on value you bring to the overall development. Now, I will say, and I was asked to talk about this just from a real estate friend of mine. There are very unscrupulous people out there. Not a lot of them, thankfully, but there's a handful of them that take TI dollars, put it in their pocket instead of put it into actually building the facility that they said. That's not only unethical, but it'll get you in trouble. So I think that's an important side note. But the money is there to develop your space. You're smirking back there. So yeah, great question, Jeffrey. What else? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Where is your? Okay. What kind of a concept are you? Fast casual. 1 unit. 7. Okay. Okay. So you've got scale already. Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Build out, oh my gosh, sorry, build out your own space.
Sure.
And then rent to yourself, like kind of like what you were saying, not necessarily with a single pad site, but.
Yeah, I think 2 things. Well, first of all, congratulations on 7 units. That's awesome.
Thank you.
You must be doing something right. I think a lot of it depends on what your plan is. Is your plan to keep growing? I mean, is that really what you want to do?
Yes.
Secondarily, how you're going to facilitate that growth. Land ownership, the value there, beyond just being able to charge yourself, pay yourself back, is you can raise then debt to grow, to facilitate growth, based off of your ownership in that property.
Right.
But you're now taking on the same risk that I was just talking about that developers are seeing right now.
Right. As you're talking, I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's.
So that's just without knowing too granularly what you're talking about as far as how big the building and all that stuff. I would just say weigh the option between being able to leverage the property that you own to get debt to grow a brand that you already have a proven track record on 7 units.
Right.
I think debt is a really risky thing for somebody that's starting a new concept. Mm-hmm. I'd much rather have an investor. Not that I want to lose anybody money, but an investor can't take your house.
Yeah, right.
I guess, yeah. But so, yeah, I think you have a proven concept, and if you want to grow through debt, I don't know what your cash position is, but if you want to use that property to raise debt to be able to grow fast, that's a great option.
Okay, thanks.
So, yeah, yes, sir.
Is there any type of real estate or type of landlord you like to stay away from for some experience?
Yeah, I don't like one-off landlords. I like working with, your big developers for a handful of reasons. One, they're going to have they're going to sometimes be the most demanding and have the highest rents. But I firmly believe when it comes to real estate, you do get what you pay for. And, if they're charging higher rents, it's probably because it's worth it. Probably, not always. But I also like working with the big developers because they all kind of talk the same language. You don't have to worry about, crazy uncle that owns 50% of the property that wants this, and you're dealing with a very sophisticated partner, and that's really what this is. When we're talking about getting large upfront chunks of money to build your concept, they're not just a landlord, but they're a partner with you at that point. They're an investor, and I would much rather have a sophisticated, stable investor that doesn't have to worry about crazy uncle as part of the business model. So yeah, I would just say if I'm staying away from somebody, it's that kind of one-off guy that has this strip center. Yeah.
Good advice, thanks.
Yes, sir. Oh, Brett.
The question's around guarantees. Are you able to still get away with no personal guarantees, or are you cross-collateralizing with some of your other restaurants?
Yeah, we still have some guarantees, but very, very, very small ones. Now, all of our guarantees, first of all, I'm glad you brought that up. When it comes to guarantees, I've seen some crazy stuff out there where people are personally guaranteeing the lease for the entire life of the lease. I mean, I've just seen some banana stuff. All of our guarantees have a very, very short runway, and they burn off over 12 months or maybe 24 months. And then anything beyond that, it would be a corporate guarantee, and it would only be a rolling guarantee. So, like, we guarantee 6 months, always rolling. Does that make sense? But yes, we're able to leverage our corporate infrastructure now to have corporate guarantees. Sometimes landlords still want to know that you have a little bit of skin in the game, personally. But as long as you feel like your concept can last a year, then we don't have a problem signing up for a year guarantee.
This is a question about kind of how you got to that $450 TI allowance number, because that seems, I'm an architect and I design restaurants,
Sure.
and I've got small mom and pop getting offered $17 and $30 a square foot.
Yeah.
And I've got more established clients who are getting $85 to $150, which seems pretty good.
Sure.
But what did y'all get on your first deal, and what did it take to get your brand established to get to the point where
Sure.
you could command a $450?
So our first,
square foot
our bowl and barrel concept was, we were at $150 a foot, but that was an interesting time where, we were just coming out of the recession. Landlords had been tired of seeing just vacant spaces for the last 6-7 years, and they were willing to do anything to get tenants in there. We also, during that time period, what happened was original developers who developed a property for, say, $300 million lost everything. Somebody else came in and bought it for, 20 cents on the dollar. So their basis was a lot lower than the original developer. So they had then money to spend on top of what they bought it for to give to tenants. So we were able to take advantage of that tipping point. But now, what we're just seeing, because of brand strength, I mean, when you can offer that, like for example, that's our Houston location. So if you want to go check out this concept, it is on the other side of that wall, I think. Yeah, it's that way. Yeah, but it's right next door to the convention center. Go check it out. When you can say, I'm going to do this in your development, then all of a sudden you become what Whole Foods 10 years ago was. So that's how we're commanding it.
As a follow-up to that,
Yes.
how critical is design to your concept?
It's very important. It's massively important. And my team knows how intimate I am with the design. I mean, I'm speaking to an architect.
Yeah.
So
I'd love to hear about your process.
yeah. Saw another hand over here.
Hi. Do you leverage on any relationships with the lenders or lending institutions or partners in any of your projects? And where did they come in all this with the lending institutions and the landlords?
Sure. So we don't currently take bank debt right now. We fund our projects through one of three ways: tenant improvement dollars, outside investors, and internal cash flow. So those are our three ways that we use. Now, I will say a lot of that has to do with amount of risk we were willing to bear. And like I said, debt scares me just because it does. Now, I obviously understand that getting TI dollars is a form of debt, but it's slightly different than a traditional source that if something goes wrong, they take everything. I don't know if that answers your question exactly, or if you're looking for more specific, granular. Are you growing a company right now?
Yes, I am.
What kind of a company?
It's a quick service restaurant retail.
Okay. How many units do you have?
We have 2 units going on 3.
Good
so
for
we're
you.
Still small.
No, that's great.
And can we get like what is there any tactical thing you do to leverage on your brand to extract the most that you can from the landlord? I mean, I know pitching your brand and
Sure.
and all that, but is there specific things that you do, and what is it that they're looking for through their lens, and
Yeah, I think there's when I saw that there was a real opportunity for us is when I started seeing developments. We've all seen these, real estate development pitch books where they have brands that are coming in, and I started seeing my name on properties that I have never even been to or spoken about or anything like that. But I see that a Rustic is going here in Richmond, Virginia. And I'm like, I've never even been to Richmond, Virginia. And I realized what happened was we were now a selling point for them, and they were leveraging our goodwill and our brand to make their development look better. And that was a light bulb moment for us when I went, okay, we have brand cachet that now developers want us, and we're that prettiest girl in the bar. So that, coupled with the fact that I have data, and I can go and say, we bring in 12,000 people a week through our doors. That's a high traffic generator, and developers want that. Yes, sir.
What is your take on groundings? Is it, for instance, for a brand that is taking off for research,
Yeah.
is it better to go ground lease and build your own, or find a? Thank you. The question is, what's your take on ground lease? If for the business that is not taking off for a future development, I've been thinking which way to go. Would you purchase land and build, or you go to a landlord and do a ground lease and build yourself? What's your take on that?
My take is if I could own the dirt, I would. If I have the cash to do it, I would always go with buying the dirt. And whether that means I stay on the dirt or I do that sale leaseback that we were talking about. But if you have the opportunity to own it, I would own it.
What about taking the ground lease?
So we have several ground leases. In fact, this one right next door is a ground lease. We have a 30-year ground lease. It's actually owned by the city of Houston. So the city of Houston is our partner on that one. It works. It absolutely works. I mean, it's proven itself for us as long as it's favorable economics for you. And I would still say you should be getting a lot of money from a landlord if you're going to do a ground lease. I mean, without question, you should be getting a lot of money. We got a lot of money here, and we're working on 2 more ground leases right now, where we're getting $6-7 million bucks.
So basically what you're saying is a ground lease will be good if the landlord actually build the space for you.
So that's a great point. One of the best tactics that I could, if you left with anything today outside of sell your business and know how to pitch yourself and know what to ask for, it's the question of whether or not I would rather get the money and do it myself or let the landlord do it per my spec. The answer is always let the landlord do it, because it's always more expensive than you think. And it's always, I mean, we're in this business, we know building something is twice as expensive as you thought and takes twice as long, right? If I can make that the landlord's issue and not mine, I would do that in a second. Then you have to have controls that they're doing it to spec and they're doing it the way you want it. But if I ever have the option of taking money or having the landlord do it, Landlord do it all day long. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just wondering, how are you vetting your investors to make sure that if things don't go the way you forecast, that you don't end up with an unhappy camper?
Well, if things don't go the way you forecast, they're going to be unhappy. Really, what it comes down to is do they have what kind of governance they have, and that's where your partnership docs come into play. And if your legal docs are sound, you're ideally positioning your investors to where they're good partners, they're advisors. But if something goes wrong, outside of getting an angry phone call, they can't do anything. And I will tell you, you owe me lunch after this. If you need good legal work, this guy right here, John Gessner, he's the best in the business. Oh, actually, we got two over here. David, yeah. I forgot you were over there. So these two, talk to these guys about that, yeah. Yes, ma'am. I think one more. We have time for one.
Do you ask of them? So do they go to the sheetrock and then you have still a huge investment for your beautiful properties, or do you ask them to do your fixtures, all of that?
We again, we try and negotiate the landlord to do as much work as possible before we have to even start spending money, whether it's my money or their money. Just as much as we can get done through the landlord's scope of work, the better off we are. Because there's always just, one of the most difficult things, and when I've seen some of the most expensive oops or uh-ohs for us, is on things like bringing in utilities, or who's heard of a scrubber? Having to deal with a scrubber, just all that kind of stuff that you don't think about, that really, frankly, doesn't do anything for your brand at all. The customer never sees it, never knows it. It doesn't do anything for you. Those are always the biggest things that cost the most, that you don't expect, so you have to spend money doing that kind of stuff instead of stuff that you really want, like buying nice tables and chairs or great signage. So the answer is, as much as you can put on the landlord, put it on the landlord, even if it means a little less money for you. So I think that does it for us. I think we're out of time. Thank you guys so much for being here.